Trends and patterns in the structure of population over time, growth rate, gender, rural-urban migration, literacy, regional structure, and trends of poverty and inequality. Understanding the trends and patterns in the structure of population is critical to analyzing a country's socioeconomic development. India, with its vast and diverse population, has witnessed significant changes in its demographic structure over the decades. These changes are reflected in growth rates, gender ratios, rural-urban migration, literacy rates, regional disparities, and the evolving nature of poverty and inequality. 1. Growth rate of population. The growth rate of a population is a key indicator of demographic change and reflects the number of people added to the population over a given period. India's population has witnessed dramatic growth over the last century, transitioning from 238 million in 1901 to over 1.4 billion today. Population growth patterns. Early growth 1901-1951. India's population growth rate was relatively slow due to high mortality rates, limited medical advancements, and underdeveloped infrastructure. Post-independence growth 1951-1981. Following independence, population growth began accelerating due to improvements in healthcare, sanitation, and agriculture. The 1951 census recorded a population of 361 million, and by 1981, it had reached 683 million. Recent trends 1981 present. In recent decades, population growth has continued but at a slowing pace due to increased awareness of family planning, urbanization, and education. The growth rate has dropped from 2.2% in the 1970s to around 1.2% currently. B. Challenges and implications. Population pressure. Despite slower growth, the large and still growing population places immense pressure on resources, infrastructure, and employment. Demographic dividend. India is experiencing a youth bulge, with a significant proportion of the population in the working age group 15 to 64 years. This presents both an opportunity and a challenge for economic growth, requiring appropriate policies for employment generation and skill development. 2. Gender and population structure. Gender dynamics in India's population structure reveal important trends and challenges regarding equality, access to resources, and participation in the economy. A gender ratio. Male to female ratio. India's sex ratio has historically been skewed towards males, with women often facing social and economic disadvantages. According to the 2011 census, the sex ratio was 940 females for 1,000 males. The child sex ratio was even lower, reflecting gender imbalances in early life. Improvement over time. Over time, there have been slight improvements in the female to male ratio due to government initiatives focused on women's education, health, and empowerment. However, gender disparities in literacy, employment, and health remain significant challenges. B. Female literacy and employment. Education. The female literacy rate has steadily improved, rising from 15% in 1951 to 65.46% in 2011. However, the gap between male and female literacy remains large, with males having a literacy rate of 82.14%. Labor force participation. Women's participation in the workforce is still low compared to men. Social norms, limited access to education, and childbearing responsibilities contribute to this disparity. Rural areas and marginalized communities particularly face these challenges. 3. Rural-urban migration. Migration trends, especially rural to urban migration, have been significant in shaping the population structure over time. Urbanization, along with industrialization and economic development, has driven people from rural areas to cities in search of better employment opportunities, education, and healthcare. Trends in rural-urban migration. Early migration pre-independence to 1950s migration was limited and mostly seasonal, driven by agriculture-related factors like crop cycles. Most Indians lived in rural areas, with urbanization concentrated in a few colonial cities. Post-independence trends 1960s present. Rapid urbanization began post-independence, driven by industrialization, the Green Revolution in agriculture, and the expansion of educational and health services. The rural-urban migration rate has increased, with urban population growth outpacing rural growth. Current trends. Cities like Mumbai, Delhi, Bengaluru, and Chennai have seen massive influxes of people, resulting in urban sprawl, increased demand for housing, and strained infrastructure. Rural areas, however, continue to face challenges in terms of employment, education, and healthcare. B. Implications of rural-urban migration. Urbanization. This leads to the growth of slums, inadequate urban infrastructure, and rising poverty in cities. The rapid influx of rural migrants often results in poor living conditions in overcrowded urban areas. Rural depopulation. Rural areas suffer from a shrinking population, leading to labor shortages in agriculture and a decline in agricultural productivity, while also facing challenges in terms of local development. 4. Literacy trends. Literacy is a fundamental indicator of social development and empowerment. In India, literacy rates have improved over the decades, but regional disparities and gender gaps persist. National literacy rates. Historical growth. India's literacy rate was only 18% in 1951. By the 2011 census, the national literacy rate had risen to 74.04%, with male literacy at 82.14% and female literacy at 65.46%. Urban versus rural disparities. Urban areas show significantly higher literacy rates compared to rural areas, reflecting disparities in educational access and quality. State variations. Some states like Kerala and Himachal Pradesh have achieved near universal literacy, while others like Bihar, Rajasthan, and Uttar Pradesh have lower literacy rates, especially among women and marginalized communities. B. Challenges. Gender gap. Despite progress, the gender gap in literacy rates remains significant, particularly in rural areas and among lower castes. Efforts to improve female literacy, especially in backward regions, remain a priority. Quality of education. The quality of education is often compromised in rural areas due to inadequate infrastructure, lack of trained teachers, and high dropout rates. 5. Regional structure of population. The distribution of population across regions in India has changed dramatically over time. Different regions have experienced varying rates of population growth, and these disparities have contributed to uneven development. Regional population growth patterns. Southern and western states, states like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, and Gujarat have relatively lower population growth rates due to better access to education, healthcare, and family planning. Northern and eastern states, states like Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, and Odisha have experienced rapid population growth, largely due to high fertility rates and limited access to family planning resources. Migration and regional disparities. Migration from poorer states to economically prosperous regions has further contributed to population concentration in states like Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Delhi. B. Developmental disparities. The uneven population growth and regional disparities have exacerbated developmental challenges, such as poverty, inadequate healthcare, and lack of infrastructure in backward states. The northern and eastern regions lag in key human development indicators, while southern and western states have experienced more rapid economic development. 6. Trends in poverty and inequality. Poverty and inequality in India are closely linked to the structural characteristics of the population. The country has made significant strides in reducing poverty, but inequality, both regional and social, remains a major issue. Poverty trends. Reduction in poverty. India has made significant progress in reducing poverty, with the poverty rate falling from over 50% in the 1950s to around 20% in 2021, according to some estimates. Poverty in rural versus urban areas. Poverty remains predominantly rural, with the highest concentrations of poverty found in states like Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, and Madhya Pradesh. Urban poverty, however, is rising due to the growth of informal sectors and inadequate urban infrastructure. B. Inequality trends. Income inequality. Income inequality has been rising in India, with the top 1% of the population controlling a significant share of the nation's wealth. This is reflected in disparities in access to healthcare, education, and economic opportunities. Regional inequality. Regional inequality persists, with southern and western states outperforming the northern and eastern states in terms of per capita income, literacy, and human development indicators. C. Social inequality. Caste and gender inequality. Social inequalities based on caste and gender continue to affect access to education, employment, and social mobility. Scheduled castes, SCs, scheduled tribes, STs, and other backward classes, OBCs, face significant social and economic disadvantages, as do women in rural areas. Government programs. The government has introduced several welfare programs, such as the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme (MGNREGS) and the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, aimed at reducing poverty and promoting inclusive growth. Previous year questions. Explain the trends in India's population growth. How have gender and migration affected the demographic structure over time? Answer. India's population growth has seen a sharp increase, with gender imbalances and rural-urban migration playing key roles in shaping the demographic landscape. Rural areas have experienced high growth, contributing to urbanization and changing gender dynamics. CAS 2018. Analyze the regional disparities in population growth and development in India. How have these disparities influenced poverty and inequality? Answer. Regional disparities in population growth, particularly between the southern and northern states, have led to uneven development, contributing to higher poverty rates and inequality in less developed regions. CAS 2017. You said, unemployment. Trends, structure and national rural employment policies. ChatGPT said. Unemployment in India, trends, structure, and national rural employment policies. Unemployment is one of the most pressing socioeconomic issues in India, affecting millions of individuals and having far-reaching consequences for the economy. Understanding the trends, structure, and government policies designed to tackle unemployment, especially in rural areas, is essential for addressing this issue effectively. 1. Trends in unemployment. Unemployment in India is influenced by various factors, including demographic changes, economic growth patterns, technological advancements, and shifts in the industrial and agricultural sectors. Historical trends. Pre-independence, under colonial rule, there was no formal measurement of unemployment, but the Indian economy was largely agrarian, and the lack of industrialization led to low productivity and poor employment opportunities. Post-independence 1950s-1980s, India's economy grew slowly, and employment largely remained within the agricultural sector. Unemployment, especially in urban areas, remained relatively high due to slow industrial growth and population pressures. Economic reforms 1991 present. The 1991 economic reforms, which included liberalization, privatization, and globalization, led to economic growth but also brought about structural changes. The shift from agriculture to industry and services led to a growing need for skilled labor, and there was an increase in both educated unemployment and underemployment. B. Recent trends. Rural-urban divide. Unemployment remains higher in urban areas than in rural areas. However, rural unemployment has become a critical issue in recent years, exacerbated by agricultural distress, seasonal fluctuations, and limited non-agricultural employment options. Youth unemployment. India's youth bulge is a significant factor in unemployment trends. A large proportion of the workforce is young and lacking the necessary skills or opportunities to find gainful employment, leading to high levels of educated unemployment. Underemployment. While official unemployment rates may not be extremely high, underemployment workers employed in jobs that do not fully utilize their skills or offer adequate wages is prevalent. This is especially true in rural areas where agriculture remains the primary source of employment. 2. Structure of unemployment. Unemployment in India manifests in various forms, including frictional unemployment, structural unemployment, cyclical unemployment, and seasonal unemployment. Each type of unemployment affects different segments of the population and poses unique challenges. Rural versus urban unemployment. Rural unemployment. In rural areas, unemployment is largely seasonal and linked to agriculture. During off-seasons, many rural workers find themselves unemployed or underemployed. Additionally, there is a significant challenge in transitioning agricultural workers to non-agricultural sectors. Urban unemployment. In urban areas, structural unemployment due to a mismatch between skills and job opportunities is a more pronounced issue. Rapid urbanization and growth of the service sector have created new jobs, but many urban workers lack the skills required for these positions. B. Types of unemployment. Frictional unemployment. This occurs when individuals transition between jobs or enter the workforce for the first time. This type of unemployment is generally short-term and is expected in a growing economy. Structural unemployment. Structural shifts in the economy, such as the shift from agriculture to industry and services, have led to a mismatch between available jobs and the skills of the labor force. This is particularly prevalent among youth and rural populations who may not have the necessary education or skills. Seasonal unemployment. In rural areas, employment in agriculture is highly dependent on seasons. Workers often face unemployment during off-seasons or when crops fail. Disguised unemployment. This occurs when more people are employed than needed, particularly in agriculture, where family labor may be employed on a small farm but is not fully utilized. This leads to a waste of labor resources. 3. National rural employment policies. The Indian government has implemented several policies aimed at reducing rural unemployment, improving the livelihood of rural populations, and enhancing the skills of rural workers. These policies focus on both direct employment generation and long-term capacity building. Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act (MGNREGA) 2005. Objective. MGNREGA is one of the largest social welfare programs aimed at providing guaranteed wage employment to rural households. The act mandates that each rural household be provided with 100 days of unskilled manual labor in a financial year. Impact. The scheme has successfully generated millions of job days in rural India, providing employment during off-seasons and supporting agricultural and infrastructure development projects. However, challenges like delayed payments, corruption, and limited scope of employment, mainly unskilled labor, have hindered its full potential. Recent changes. The government has also emphasized the inclusion of asset creation under MGNREGA, such as rural infrastructure projects e.g., roads, water conservation, and irrigation that can enhance long-term economic growth. B. National Skill Development Mission 2015. Objective. The National Skill Development Mission focuses on providing skills training to the rural workforce to help them find better employment opportunities. It aims to provide employment to youth by equipping them with market-relevant skills, particularly in non-agricultural sectors. Implementation. Through partnerships with private sector companies, training institutions, and government bodies, the mission has been working to improve skill levels in areas such as IT, healthcare, construction, and retail. It also includes programs for self-employment and entrepreneurship. See Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana (PMAY) Rural. Objective. While primarily focused on providing affordable housing in rural areas, PMAY Rural also aims to generate employment opportunities. The construction of homes involves local labor and provides a significant boost to employment in the construction and allied sectors. Impact. The program has created jobs for rural workers in both skilled and unskilled categories. The construction of roads, sanitation facilities, and housing projects has provided a steady stream of work for many rural inhabitants. D. Pradhan Mantri Roजgar Protsahan Yojana (PMRPY). Objective. PMRPY aims to incentivize employers to create new jobs, particularly in the formal sector, by providing subsidies on wages. The goal is to promote formal employment and reduce unemployment, especially in rural areas. Implementation. The government offers incentives for companies to hire more workers, focusing on sectors like textiles, agriculture, and handicrafts, which are predominant in rural areas. D. Deen Dayal Upadhyaya Gramin Kaushalya Yojana (DDUGKY) 2014. Objective. This scheme aims to skill rural youth and provide them with jobs in the formal sector. It focuses on providing training to youth from rural areas to help them secure employment in various sectors. Focus areas. The program focuses on sectors like textiles, hospitality, construction, and agriculture. It aims to place trained youth in jobs and provide financial assistance to training institutes and placement agencies. F. State-specific rural employment schemes. Many states have also introduced their own rural employment schemes tailored to local needs. For example, Kerala's Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme and Tamil Nadu's Rural Livelihood Mission focus on both employment generation and capacity building. 4. Challenges in tackling unemployment. Despite various efforts, several challenges continue to hinder the reduction of unemployment in India, especially in rural areas. Insufficient industrialization in rural areas. Rural areas still have limited non-agricultural employment opportunities. Industrialization has been concentrated in urban centers, leaving rural areas reliant on agriculture, which is often seasonal and inadequate in providing stable jobs. B. Skill mismatch. A major challenge in reducing unemployment is the mismatch between the skills possessed by the workforce and the skills required by employers. The rapid growth of the service sector and high-tech industries has created a demand for skilled labor, which is not sufficiently met by the existing workforce. C. Quality of employment. While various government schemes have created employment opportunities, many of these jobs are in the informal sector, which lacks job security, benefits, and social protections. This type of employment does not contribute significantly to long-term economic security. D. Population pressure. India's large and growing population continues to place strain on available jobs. The sheer number of new entrants to the job market every year exacerbates the challenges of job creation. Previous year questions. Explain the trends in unemployment in India, particularly focusing on rural-urban migration and its impact on employment patterns. Answer. Unemployment is a critical issue, with rural areas facing seasonal unemployment and urban areas experiencing structural unemployment. Rural-urban migration has increased the pressure on urban job markets, leading to higher unemployment in cities. CAS 2017. Discuss the role of MGNREGA in addressing rural unemployment. What are its limitations? Answer. MGNREGA has provided significant employment opportunities in rural areas, but its limitations include delayed payments, corruption, and the focus on unskilled labor. CAS 2016. Evaluate the effectiveness of National Skill Development Mission in addressing unemployment in rural areas. Answer. The National Skill Development Mission aims to bridge the skills gap by providing training to rural youth, but challenges in implementation and matching skills with market demand remain. CAS 2018. You said. Indicators of development, physical quality of life index, human development index, ChatGPT said. Indicators of development, physical quality of life index and human development index. Development is a multifaceted concept that encompasses economic, social, political, and environmental dimensions. To measure the progress of nations and regions, a variety of indicators are employed. Among the most significant of these are the physical quality of life index (PQLI) and the human development index (HDI). These indices are designed to assess human well-being beyond traditional economic measures like GDP, incorporating factors such as health, education, and living standards. 1. Physical quality of life index (PQLI). The physical quality of life index (PQLI) was developed by M.A.K. Lodhi in 1979. It is a composite index that combines indicators of health and education to measure the quality of life in a given country or region. The primary purpose of PQLI is to provide a more holistic measure of development that goes beyond economic output. Components of PQLI. PQLI consists of 3 basic components, each representing a different aspect of human development. Life expectancy at age 1. This is a key indicator of a country's health status. It refers to the average number of years a person is expected to live, starting from the age of 1 year. It is used as a proxy for the overall healthcare system, sanitation, and nutrition in a country. Infant mortality rate. This is the number of deaths of infants under 1 year of age per 1,000 live births. A lower infant mortality rate indicates better healthcare facilities, maternal care, and general living conditions. Basic literacy rate. This is the percentage of the population that is able to read and write at a specified age, usually 15 years and above. It reflects the educational standards and access to education in the country. Each of these indicators is normalized on a scale of 0 to 100, and the average of the 3 scores is calculated to arrive at the overall PQLI. Interpretation of PQLI. A PQLI score closer to 100 indicates a high quality of life and overall well-being, while a lower score suggests that there are deficiencies in healthcare, education, or living conditions. PQLI offers a broader view of development by including measures of physical well-being and educational access, rather than just focusing on economic metrics. Limitations of PQLI. Lack of economic dimension. PQLI does not directly consider income or economic wealth, which are essential drivers of development. As such, it may overlook disparities in wealth within a population. No consideration of inequality. PQLI treats the country as a whole and does not address regional or income inequalities, which can mask disparities in quality of life. Limited indicators. The index only includes 3 indicators, which may not capture the full range of factors influencing development. 2. Human Development Index (HDI). The Human Development Index (HDI), developed by the United Nations Development Programme (UNDP) in 1990, is a more comprehensive measure of human development than PQLI. HDI takes into account a broader spectrum of factors and aims to provide a more nuanced picture of human well-being. Components of HDI. HDI is based on 3 key dimensions. Health. Life expectancy. Life expectancy at birth is used as a measure of a population's health. A higher life expectancy generally correlates with better healthcare, sanitation, and nutrition. Education. Mean years of schooling and expected years of schooling. Mean years of schooling. This measures the average number of years of schooling received by adults aged 25 and older. It reflects the country's educational infrastructure and the level of education attained by its adult population. Expected years of schooling. This measures the number of years of schooling a child of school entry age is expected to receive, assuming the age-specific enrollment ratios stay the same throughout the child's life. Standard of living. Gross national income per capita. The HDI uses GNI per capita adjusted for purchasing power parity, or PPP, as a proxy for the standard of living. This component takes into account income levels and their distribution, adjusting for the relative cost of living and inflation in different countries. Each dimension is scored between 0 and 1. The HDI is then calculated by taking the geometric mean of the normalized scores for each of the 3 dimensions. Interpretation of HDI. The HDI score ranges from 0 to 1. A score closer to 1 indicates a higher level of human development, signifying better living conditions, higher levels of education, and improved health outcomes. HDI provides a broader perspective on development, considering both economic and non-economic factors such as education and health. Categories of HDI. Based on HDI scores, countries are categorized into 4 groups. Very high human development, 0.8 and above. High human development, 0.7 to 0.799. Medium human development, 0.55 to 0.699. Low human development, below 0.55. Limitations of HDI. Income inequality. HDI does not account for the distribution of income. A country with high income inequality can have a high HDI despite significant disparities in living standards. Exclusion of environmental factors. HDI does not take into account environmental sustainability, which is becoming an increasingly important aspect of development. Cultural and social factors. While HDI includes education and health, it does not directly measure other aspects of human development, such as political freedom, security, and cultural aspects. Comparing PQLI and HDI. Both the Physical Quality of Life Index (PQLI) and the Human Development Index (HDI) aim to measure the overall well-being of a population, but they differ in scope and methodology. PQLI is more focused on basic human needs, health and education, and provides a snapshot of physical quality of life, whereas HDI is a broader measure that incorporates economic factors, income, along with health and education. PQLI uses only 3 indicators, while HDI includes multiple dimensions of development, education, income, health. HDI, by including income, offers a better understanding of how economic development contributes to human development, while PQLI may underestimate the role of income in overall quality of life. Previous year questions. Explain the concept of Human Development Index (HDI) and discuss its components. How is it useful in measuring the development of a country? Answer. HDI is a composite index that measures development based on health, education, and standard of living. Its components include life expectancy, mean years of schooling, expected years of schooling, and GNI per capita. HDI provides a broader understanding of development than economic indicators alone. CAS 2019. What is the Physical Quality of Life Index (PQLI)? Discuss its limitations in assessing development. Answer. PQLI is a composite index measuring life expectancy, infant mortality, and literacy. While it provides valuable insight into basic quality of life, its limitations include the exclusion of economic factors and inequality within the population. CAS 2017. How does the HDI help in understanding the human development status of a nation? Illustrate with examples. Answer. HDI is a comprehensive measure that takes into account life expectancy, education, and income. Countries with higher HDI scores generally have better healthcare, education systems, and living standards. For example, countries like Norway and Switzerland rank high on the HDI scale. CAS 2018. You said. Human Poverty Index, Gender Development Index, National Happiness Index. ChatGPT said. Human Poverty Index (HPI), Gender Development Index (GDI), and National Happiness Index. In addition to the more commonly known development indices like the Human Development Index (HDI), there are other important measures that provide further insights into the social, economic, and psychological dimensions of human development. These include the Human Poverty Index (HPI), the Gender Development Index (GDI), and the National Happiness Index. Each of these indices focuses on a unique aspect of development, providing a more holistic and inclusive view of societal well-being. 1. Human Poverty Index (HPI). The Human Poverty Index (HPI) was introduced by the United Nations Development Program (UNDP) in 1997 as a complementary indicator to the Human Development Index (HDI). While HDI measures overall development by focusing on income, education, and life expectancy, the HPI is designed to specifically assess the level of deprivation or poverty that people face, providing a more nuanced understanding of poverty beyond mere income levels. Components of HPI. The HPI was originally developed in two forms. HPI 1 for developing countries. HPI 2 for developed countries. HPI 1 includes the following indicators. Probability at birth of not surviving to age 40. This indicator reflects health poverty, focusing on the risk of premature death due to inadequate healthcare and living conditions. Adult literacy rate. This measures the percentage of the adult population that cannot read or write, serving as a proxy for educational deprivation. Access to safe water. The lack of access to clean and safe drinking water is a key indicator of material poverty. Child malnutrition. This assesses the percentage of children under age 5 who are underweight, providing an insight into food insecurity and health-related poverty. The HPI 2, used in more developed countries, typically includes indicators like long-term unemployment rate, income poverty below a certain threshold, educational deprivation, interpretation of HPI. A higher HPI value indicates higher levels of human poverty in a given country or region. It highlights the multidimensional nature of poverty, recognizing that economic deprivation alone does not fully capture the extent of human poverty. Countries with low levels of human development but high levels of inequality or deprivation may appear poorer in the HPI compared to the HDI. Limitations of HPI. Limited to basic deprivation. The HPI does not consider broader factors of social or economic inequality, such as wealth distribution or quality of life beyond health and education. Overlooks subjective poverty. It does not account for subjective experiences of poverty, such as social exclusion or lack of political voice. 2. Gender Development Index (GDI). The Gender Development Index (GDI) is a measure that is used to highlight gender inequality in human development. The GDI was introduced by the United Nations Development Program (UNDP) to examine the disparity between men and women in terms of human development achievements, and it is closely related to the Human Development Index (HDI). Components of GDI. The GDI is calculated by adjusting the HDI for gender disparities in 3 dimensions. Health, life expectancy at birth. Life expectancy is measured separately for men and women, and the gender gap is considered in the calculation. Education, mean years of schooling and expected years of schooling. The gender gap in educational attainment, both in terms of years of schooling and enrollment rates, is assessed. Standard of living. Gross national income per capita (GNI) per capita is calculated for both men and women, and the disparity in income levels between genders is considered. The GDI uses the same methodology as the HDI but makes adjustments for gender disparities. The GDI is expressed as a ratio of the female HDI to the male HDI, with a value of 1 indicating no gender disparity. Interpretation of GDI. A higher GDI indicates less gender disparity in human development. If the GDI score is equal to the HDI score, it suggests no gender disparity in development. If the GDI score is significantly lower than the HDI score, it implies that women are relatively disadvantaged compared to men in terms of health, education, and income. Limitations of GDI. Simplified measurement. GDI provides a simplified view of gender inequality and may not capture the complexities of gender issues, such as gender-based violence, discrimination, or cultural factors. Excludes other dimensions. GDI focuses on basic human development measures and may not account for broader aspects of gender equality, such as political empowerment or legal rights. 3. National Happiness Index. The National Happiness Index is a relatively newer concept in the field of development measurement. It reflects a country's overall happiness and well-being of its citizens. Bhutan is famously known for adopting the concept of gross national happiness (GNH) as an alternative to GDP as the primary measure of national success. Other countries have followed suit by developing their own happiness indices, with the World Happiness Report being one of the most recognized global assessments. Components of the National Happiness Index. Different countries may define and measure happiness in slightly different ways, but the most commonly included factors in the National Happiness Index are economic factors. Income, although not the sole determinant, income is considered as an important aspect of individual happiness, with a focus on financial security and living standards. Social support. Strong social networks, community support, and a sense of belonging contribute to overall well-being and happiness. Life expectancy and health. Physical and mental health are vital components of happiness, and countries with better healthcare systems and longevity tend to score higher in happiness rankings. Freedom to make life choices. The freedom individuals have to make personal and professional decisions is a critical component of happiness. Generosity. Acts of kindness, generosity, and social cooperation contribute to higher happiness levels in societies. Corruption and trust. The level of trust in government institutions and the absence of corruption are significant factors affecting societal happiness. The World Happiness Report, published by the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network (SDSN), ranks countries on a scale of 0 to 10, based on the above factors. Interpretation of the National Happiness Index. A higher happiness score indicates that people in a country generally report higher levels of subjective well-being, life satisfaction, and positive social conditions. Countries with higher happiness scores typically have robust healthcare systems, strong social support networks, economic stability, and good governance. Limitations of the National Happiness Index. Subjective nature. Happiness is inherently subjective, and what makes one person happy may not have the same effect on others. Thus, measuring happiness can be influenced by individual perceptions, cultural values, and expectations. Cultural bias. Different cultural norms and expectations may influence how happiness is understood and reported across countries. Previous year questions. What is the Human Poverty Index (HPI) and how does it differ from the Human Development Index (HDI? Discuss its significance in measuring poverty. Answer. The Human Poverty Index (HPI) is designed to assess multidimensional poverty, including health, education, and basic living conditions. Unlike HDI, which focuses on achievements, HPI measures deprivation in these areas. CAS 2020. Explain the Gender Development Index (GDI) and its significance in measuring gender equality in human development. Answer. The Gender Development Index (GDI) measures the disparity between male and female development in terms of health, education, and income. It highlights gender inequality in a country and provides insight into the state of gender equity. CAS 2018. What are the key components of the National Happiness Index, and how does it reflect the well-being of a country's population? Answer. The National Happiness Index includes factors such as income, social support, life expectancy, freedom to make choices, generosity, and trust in government. It reflects the subjective well-being of a nation's citizens and the overall quality of life. CAS 2019. You said. Indian public finance, government budgeting, Indian tax system, public expenditure, public debt, deficit and subsidies in the Indian economy. ChatGPT said. Indian public finance, government budgeting, Indian tax system, public expenditure, public debt, deficit and subsidies in the Indian economy. Public finance plays a crucial role in the economic development of any country, as it deals with the management of public revenue, expenditure, and debt. In India, public finance is a critical area that impacts economic policy, governance, and the allocation of resources. The various components of Indian public finance include government budgeting, taxation, public expenditure, public debt, fiscal deficits, and subsidies. These elements collectively determine the financial health of the government and influence overall economic growth. 1. Indian public finance. Public finance refers to the study of the role of the government in the economy, specifically how the government raises and spends funds to support economic growth and development. In India, public finance is crucial for financing public goods and services, infrastructure development, and social welfare programs. Key areas of Indian public finance. Revenue generation. The government generates revenue through taxes, fees, and other sources like public sector profits, foreign aid, and borrowing. Public expenditure. The government allocates revenue for various purposes like defense, infrastructure, health, education, and social welfare. Fiscal deficits. The fiscal deficit is the difference between the government's total expenditure and its total revenue, excluding borrowings. A high fiscal deficit indicates that the government is borrowing heavily to finance its spending. Public debt. The government borrows from domestic and international markets to finance its deficits. The level of public debt is an important indicator of fiscal health. 2. Government budgeting. The government budget is an annual financial statement that outlines the government's planned revenue and expenditure for the upcoming fiscal year. It is a critical tool for economic policy and governance. Types of budgets. Revenue budget. This includes the government's receipts, taxes, non-tax revenues, and the expenditure on day-to-day activities, salaries, subsidies, interest payments. Capital budget. This outlines the expenditure on long-term investments like infrastructure development and the receipts from loans or the sale of assets. Budget process in India. The Union Budget is presented by the Finance Minister of India, usually on February 1st each year. The budget speech includes a breakdown of the allocation of funds for different sectors, e.g., defense, education, infrastructure, health. After the presentation, the budget is discussed in the Parliament, where it is debated and amended before being passed. Key budget terminology. Surplus budget, when the government's revenue exceeds its expenditure. Deficit budget, when the government's expenditure exceeds its revenue, necessitating borrowing. Balanced budget, when the government's revenue equals its expenditure. 3. Indian tax system. The Indian tax system is structured to generate revenue for the government to fund various public services and infrastructure. The tax system is divided into two main categories: direct taxes and indirect taxes. Direct taxes. These are taxes directly levied on individuals and entities, such as income tax, levied on individual and corporate income, progressive in nature, higher income, higher tax. Corporate tax, imposed on companies' profits. Wealth tax, tax on the net wealth of an individual or company, though this tax was abolished in 2015. Indirect taxes. These are taxes levied on goods and services, which are paid indirectly by consumers. Goods and Services Tax (GST), a comprehensive indirect tax that replaced multiple taxes like VAT, service tax, and excise duty, aiming to create a single unified market. Customs duty, tax on imported goods. Excise duty, levied on the production of goods. Tax reforms. India has undergone significant tax reforms over the years, including the implementation of GST in 2017, which aimed at simplifying the tax structure and improving compliance. The Income Tax Act, 1961, governs direct taxation in India. 4. Public expenditure. Public expenditure refers to the government spending on goods, services, and welfare programs. It includes both capital and revenue expenditures, and its primary objectives are to improve infrastructure, healthcare, education, defense, and social welfare. Types of public expenditure. Revenue expenditure, spending on routine operations and services like salaries, subsidies, and interest payments. These are recurring expenses. Capital expenditure, spending on long-term projects like infrastructure, machinery, and development programs. These are investments that help in future growth. Challenges in public expenditure. Inefficiency, misallocation and inefficiency in spending can reduce the effectiveness of public expenditure. Rising subsidies, particularly in sectors like food, fuel, and fertilizers, often create a financial burden and distort market signals. Inflationary pressure, excessive public spending can lead to inflationary pressures, which can undermine economic stability. 5. Public debt. Public debt refers to the borrowing by the government to meet its expenditure when revenue is insufficient. It includes both domestic debt borrowed from within the country and external debt borrowed from foreign sources. Types of public debt. Internal debt, borrowing from domestic banks, financial institutions, and the public, e.g., through government bonds. External debt, borrowing from foreign governments, international organizations like the World Bank, or foreign financial institutions. Managing public debt. The government borrows through treasury bills, bonds, and loans to meet its fiscal deficit. A high level of public debt can be dangerous, as it may lead to higher interest payments, reducing the funds available for other developmental activities. 6. Deficit. A deficit occurs when a government's total expenditure exceeds its total revenue. In India, there are several types of deficits that are used to assess fiscal health. Types of deficits. Fiscal deficit, the difference between the government's total expenditure and its total revenue, excluding borrowings. It indicates the total borrowing requirements of the government. Revenue deficit, the difference between the government's revenue expenditure and its revenue receipts. It indicates that the government is borrowing to meet its regular, non-investment expenditures. Primary deficit, fiscal deficit minus interest payments. It indicates the government's borrowing requirements excluding interest on past debt. Concerns with deficits. High deficits, persistent high deficits can lead to inflation, rising debt, and reduced investor confidence. Debt sustainability, a high fiscal deficit over time can lead to unsustainable public debt. 7. Subsidies in the Indian economy. Subsidies are financial assistance provided by the government to encourage production or consumption of certain goods and services. They are used to reduce the cost burden on consumers and promote social welfare. Types of subsidies. Food subsidies. Under schemes like the Public Distribution System (PDS), the government provides subsidized food grains to the poor. Fertilizer subsidies. To ensure that fertilizers are affordable for farmers, the government provides subsidies on fertilizers. Fuel subsidies. The government provides subsidies on petroleum products like LPG, kerosene, and diesel to keep prices affordable for low-income groups. Challenges with subsidies. Fiscal burden. Subsidies contribute significantly to the fiscal deficit. In India, subsidies on food, fuel, and fertilizers consume a large portion of the budget. Inefficiency. Subsidies often do not reach the intended beneficiaries and can distort market incentives. Targeting issues. Ineffective targeting of subsidies can lead to misuse and leakages, particularly in large programs like PDS. Previous year questions. Discuss the structure of the Indian tax system. How has the introduction of GST improved the tax regime? Answer. The Indian tax system is a combination of direct and indirect taxes, with major reforms like GST aimed at creating a single unified market, reducing tax evasion, and simplifying compliance. CAS 2020. What are the major sources of public revenue in India? How does the government manage public debt? Answer. Major sources of public revenue include taxes, loans, and non-tax revenues. Public debt is managed through government borrowing, issuance of bonds, and loans from international institutions. CAS 2019. Explain the concept of fiscal deficit and revenue deficit. Why are they important in measuring the health of the Indian economy? Answer. Fiscal deficit represents the total borrowing requirements of the government, while revenue deficit indicates the shortfall in the government's revenue to meet its day-to-day expenditure. High deficits can indicate financial stress and require corrective measures. CAS 2018. You said. Center-state financial relation. Recent fiscal and monetary policy issues and their impact. Structure of Indian banking and non-banking financial institutions and reforms. ChatGPT said. Center-state financial relations. Recent fiscal and monetary policy issues and their impact. Structure of Indian banking and non-banking financial institutions and reforms. India's economic structure relies on the effective management of its financial relations, particularly between the center and the states. Understanding this financial relationship, along with the monetary and fiscal policy issues, is critical for comprehending the overall functioning of the Indian economy. Additionally, the structure of Indian banking and non-banking financial institutions, along with the financial reforms in India, is vital for fostering economic growth, stability, and inclusivity. 1. Center-state financial relations. The financial relationship between the center and the states in India is governed by the Constitution of India and several financial mechanisms like the Finance Commission, central and state budgets, and the Goods and Services Tax (GST) system. The distribution of fiscal powers, resources, and responsibilities is critical for balanced economic growth and governance. Key aspects of center-state financial relations: division of revenue. Taxes collected by the center. The center collects taxes like income tax, customs duty, and corporate tax. However, part of this revenue is transferred to the states through mechanisms like the Finance Commission and GST revenue sharing. Taxes collected by states. States levy taxes like sales tax, VAT prior to GST, stamp duty, and property taxes. With the implementation of GST, certain taxes previously collected by states, such as VAT and excise duty on goods, are now subsumed under a unified tax system. Finance Commission. The Finance Commission is a body established by the President every 5 years to determine the distribution of financial resources between the center and states. The Commission considers factors like population, economic disparities, and needs of the states to allocate resources equitably. Grants and aid. These are transfers from the center to the states to ensure that states with lower revenue-generating capacity can still meet their financial requirements. These grants may be non-planned grants for specific purposes like relief from natural disasters or planned grants for developmental activities. Borrowing powers. States have limited powers to borrow money from the market. However, they can borrow from the center or with its approval. This is a key issue, especially when states face financial constraints due to inadequate revenue collection or excessive expenditure. Challenges in center-state financial relations. Fiscal imbalances. While the center enjoys more revenue-generating capacity, the states often face revenue shortfalls, leading to fiscal imbalances. GST implementation. The transition to GST has created challenges, particularly in the initial years, as states lost control over some of their taxation powers. Dependency on central transfers. Many states are dependent on financial transfers from the center, which can reduce their fiscal autonomy. 2. Recent fiscal and monetary policy issues and their impact. Fiscal policy refers to the government's use of taxation and spending to influence the economy, while monetary policy is concerned with the control of the money supply and interest rates to stabilize the economy. Both policies have been central to managing India's economic challenges. Recent fiscal policy issues. Fiscal deficit. One of the major fiscal challenges in India has been controlling the fiscal deficit. The government has often struggled to balance expenditure with revenue, leading to an increased fiscal deficit. The fiscal deficit in India for the financial year 2023-24 was targeted at 6.4% of GDP, indicating a need for fiscal consolidation. Subsidies. The growing burden of subsidies on food, fuel, and fertilizers has been a key issue. The government has faced criticism for its inefficient subsidy distribution mechanisms, which often benefit the wrong sections of society and distort market prices. Public debt. The government's borrowing to meet fiscal deficits has raised concerns about the sustainability of public debt. Excessive borrowing could lead to higher interest payments, crowding out private investment and reducing the scope for developmental spending. GST implementation. The introduction of Goods and Services Tax (GST) was a major fiscal policy reform, but it has faced challenges, including issues in the smooth implementation of tax rates, compliance, and compensation to states for revenue loss during the transition period. Recent monetary policy issues. Inflation. Controlling inflation has been one of the Reserve Bank of India (RBI's) key challenges. While inflation has been relatively under control in recent years, global inflationary pressures, e.g., due to crude oil prices, food prices continue to affect the Indian economy. The Consumer Price Index (CPI) inflation rate has often exceeded the RBI's target range of 4%, leading to changes in monetary policy stance. Repo rate changes. The Reserve Bank of India (RBI) has been adjusting the repo rate to control inflation and stimulate or cool down the economy. Lowering the repo rate can encourage borrowing and investment, while raising it can curb inflationary pressures. Liquidity management. The RBI has faced the challenge of managing excess liquidity in the market due to various fiscal and monetary interventions, such as bond buying programs and relief packages during economic slowdowns like the COVID-19 pandemic. Impact of fiscal and monetary policy issues. Economic growth. Mismanagement of fiscal policy can lead to lower economic growth, reduced investor confidence, and fiscal crises. Monetary policy adjustments, such as lowering interest rates, can stimulate investment and consumption, boosting economic growth. Inflation control. Inflationary pressures can erode the purchasing power of consumers. Through monetary tightening, raising repo rates, the RBI aims to control inflation, but this can sometimes slow down economic growth. Employment and poverty. Fiscal policies targeting infrastructure development and social welfare can